Hi, Karlton, and welcome to this series of Authors Talk. It's been a little while since your last book got published. How many years now? Three?
Yeah, two or three.
Okay. So
I'm working on another book right now.
you are writing on another book. That's
Mhm.
beautiful news. What is it about?
Well, we have such a huge increase in C-section births
Yes.
in the world. And, C-section babies have a different set of issues coming into the world.
Yeah.
Uh, they don't work through the normal doorway with their mothers, and they don't have a chance to initiate their own birth. It's usually, unless it's an emergency, somebody else starts their birth, and somebody else comes and gets them. Somebody comes into this private world they've lived in for their whole lives. And just imagine how scary that must be. Babies are fully alert, sentient, thoughtful, sensitive human beings. And we know they feel pain just like we do. We know they have sensitive emotions, and maybe even more than ours because they're so little and young and vulnerable. So what does it feel like when, you're in this strange place? Your mother you're in a hospital because you're going to have a C-section birth. And what are those sounds and what's that different feeling? Babies can hear and they can see when they're in the womb, and they can perceive. I guess perceive is the important word, Olga, because whatever the mother is feeling, it produces bioinformation molecules in her blood. And so if she's stressed out or anxious, then her cortisol levels are high, and her catecholamines are doing funny things. The adrenaline, noradrenaline, norepinephrine, it's a little bit of a roller coaster ride even before the birth starts, because we're in a hospital, strange place. And the babies might be wondering, where's the music? I don't hear our family dog barking. Where am I? Are we grocery shopping? No, this place feels different than we've been before. And mom feels different than we've been before. And then, of course, mom gets medications, and the baby must feel like, what? You don't feel me anymore. I'm really here alone now. What's that like? And then, of course, there's a major abdominal surgery where the surgeons will come through, going through all these different layers. And finally, you know, someone comes in your room, your your womb, which has been cozy and pink and wet and, warm, and big hands come in, hands belonging to someone you don't know, and they grab you and they take you out just instantly. It takes 1 minute. And so, can you imagine how shocking that must be? You
Hmm.
know, we human beings are used to being born over a period of time. And so, this shocking moment, it can feel invasive. Babies can begin life, extrauterine life, feeling attacked or pursued, or, alone. My mom's gone. And boom, suddenly they're outside, and these bright lights and cold air and strange places. Strangers are here. Where's my familiar environment? And then, you know, I'm usually taken away from my mom. I don't get to bond with her. There's no golden hour where I can lie on her skin and remember, her breathing and feel her heart rate, crab along and look for the nipples. Babies can do that. Newborn babies can do that. C-section babies are taken away.
Mm. Right. So, Carton, you have been thinking about C-section quite a while. Uh, I think I remember just when we were working towards your latest book, you were also wondering about what could be done about this number of children now increasing
Mm,
almost everywhere.
mm,
S- And now I see that you are doing the next step towards the implementation of the book.
Yeah, well, I mean, C-section, let's call them cesarean births rather than C-section. There's
Mm,
something much nicer about cesarean births. And cesarean birthing mothers have a whole different set of challenges compared to mothers who birth vaginally because of what happens to their baby.
mm,
And their baby will startle differently. Their baby will feel differently about contact. Their baby might feel afraid or over needy, never wanting to leave you. And your baby might be crying for reasons you don't understand. And so, cesarean-born babies, just like vaginally born babies, have a brain that's at the highest level of activity of life. These moments just before birth and during birth and after birth is when the brain is forming the most neural connections at the fastest rate ever. So if a baby is born cesarean, he or she will have a whole different uh, sensibility in her brain, a whole different feeling about what life means, and everything else that they experience will be built on top of that experience and how it was recorded in their brain. And so, they can be very challenging until we understand them and understand why their behavior is the way it is and how it might be different than vaginally born babies, and or how it might be similar but more intense than vaginally born babies. And so, C-section moms, you know, well, they gave birth and they have a baby, but their challenges are greater generally because they can't hold their baby. They can't carry their baby around. They can't walk, recovering from major abdominal surgery, and their babies are astonished. Their babies are, still in a bit of shock about, wow, how did I get here? That's the first thing that happened to them. That stays in their system, stays in their body, stays in their implicit memories, and of course it gets constellated very intensely throughout the brain. So we have to love them and nurture them in a special way, and we have to support cesarean birth burning mothers, because their stress levels are really influenced by what happened to them during the birth and the medication they took and the surgery they took. And now they might have a baby that they feel like is, even more hard and challenging to raise than a vaginally born baby. So our new book is a manual. It's like how to, I don't know what we're going to call it, but it's like how to raise your C-section baby. And we want to reach families who have a C-section baby. And in the book, we've interviewed lots of mothers who've had cesarean births, and we've cataloged the types of behaviors that challenge them the most. So we have a list of behaviors, and you can look in the book and read down a list about startling or persistent crying, unexplained crying, or babies who are super clingy, or other behaviors that are more intense in cesarean-born babies. So we can look down this list that we compiled from all these interviews with mothers and what bothers them most and where they feel most helpless and needy. And then we say, okay, we recognize this behavior. And look, here's where it comes from. It comes from this part of the cesarean birth. It comes from being pursued. It comes from being separated. It comes from, all the things that happen that are different for cesarean-born babies. And so then two things happen. Mothers understand why the symptom is there, whatever it is, crying or startling or staring off, or dissociating. And they can understand, oh, this is where it came from. And the second thing that happens, besides them understanding, is they get a feeling for what the birth was like for their baby.
Mhm.
That's what we need to know about all babies. We need to understand what their birth was like for them. Even in vaginal births, we say, oh, birth is such a painful thing. Normally, we're referring to the mother when we say how painful birth is. And yet, it's the babies whose craniums, thin, paper thin craniums, pushing against the bones of the mother that cause the mother that pain. The baby's right there, but with its head, and there's a brain inside. So, cesarean-born babies, when they're understood what they might have been through, they're much easier to reach, they're much easier to communicate with. So we have types of symptomatic behaviors that we've identified. We explain how it was likely that those were created. And then we talk about what you can do with your baby, how you can help the baby release some of its anxiety that it's hanging on to, how we could help the feelings that are held deep in the psyche now of the baby and deep in the body, how we could help those come up and evaporate and metabolize, and games that mothers and fathers can play with their babies, and ways to address these particular problems that are more prominent with cesarean-born babies. So that's a long version of what our new book is going to be about.
Have you got a title, Karlton, or a working title?
Well, our working titles is how to raise your cesarean-born baby, how to raise your
Okay.
cesarean-born baby. But I don't know if we'll keep that title. It,
Yeah.
it, it,
Yeah.
it is kind of like a manual, and that title might appeal to parents who are frustrated or confused about what to do about their baby, and with this different set of problems that they have compared to vaginally born babies and their families.
Carlton, because you have been in the field for decades now, and you have worked in different, even continents, and you have encountered different profiles of maternal environments, mothers in Europe, mothers in the States, in Mexico, in I don't know how many other places you have been to. Do you happen to have uh, seen that there are some similarities between the mother fathers of Caesarean born children, which might give us a clue what could possibly be connected with vaginal birth, although as you mentioned, it can be traumatic as well, and or a C-section. Have you seen any similarities or whatever?
The one thing that we need to mention is that, first of all, cesarean births are rising still, even with all the information we have about that mothers have a more difficult time bonding. The mothers have the blues longer. Mothers have reported higher stress levels. They've reported disappointment with the way they gave birth. They're not as happy, and it's harder to bond. So it's a sad situation, because most of those surgeries were not medically necessary for the mother or the baby. You see, so we're creating. mm, what happens to babies during birth influences the way they see the world and the way they are in the world and the way they navigate through the world when they grow up. And there are major psychological consequences from obstetrical interventions, and this C-section birth is the most major of obstetrical interventions. And so, in some ways, we're creating a new culture, because more and more people will feel differently about life and how life should be done. And more people will feel like, well, no matter what happens, it'll be okay. Somebody will come in and rescue us. Or more and more people will feel like, I don't know when to start my project. I'll just wait for it to happen. Maybe it'll be done to me, like my birth was done to me. And more people will be alienated from the safety, that bodily feeling of yummy, golden, syrupy safety that vaginally born babies who are left with their mothers have. So now we're developing a culture of fear and anxiety and violence, because it can feel violent to have your mother cut open and you pulled out of her body. And the thing is, in different cultures, in Mexico, for example, the cesarean rate is almost 60%. Can you
Mhm.
imagine? More than half the people that are born uh, come into the world that way, and they're filling the streets with their attitudes and their feelings about life. I don't know if you've ever tried to drive in Mexico City, but it is a wild ride, with one complication after another, and one traffic jam. Mexicans are very expressive with their language and their horns and their gestures. And so imagine a vast highway full of almost all cesarean-born babies. How that's different because of what they didn't get. They didn't get to flow through the tunnel. They didn't get to go down the road of their birth with their mother helping them and being a teammate with her. So the flow and the decisions of, oh, I should turn here, I should be careful here, I need to work really hard right now. All those things that happen in babies' minds when they're being born are gone. And you have a world that's different. I've
So,
heard that in
so
I've heard that in
Carlton, you speak about the differences, the impact on the people, on the children born cesarean, because of the experience of the different doorway they come to the world. To borrow this phrase from Jane English, um, but you mentioned this absence of flow later on in the children because of a C-section. Do you happen to witness or to have seen this absence of flow during the gestation period between the, the pregnant parent mother and the baby in gestation. What was the bonding quality, let's say, during the gestation period?
Well, the babies I've worked with who were conceived by mothers who were born by by cesarean. I want to be real gentle with that word now. I even want almost I want to decapitalize the C in cesarean so we don't have to think about Caesar when this a man when we talk about cesarean births. But you know, mothers who were born cesarean have a basic template for bonding and relationship with the world, including their own baby. The way they entered into the world is transcribed in their brain and their movements and their feelings. So even in talking to their baby, there will be a background in the mother that's different. And it's not as biological. It's not as juicy. It's not as cellular. There are, in her energy field, there are scalpels and machines and noises. And we see more and more like these movies of people turning into machines and machines coming and getting us and cars turning into machines and the whole machine world taking over, kind of begins with some of these templates that form around these machine assisted births compared to a flow birth, the flowing, maybe a home birth with family around, and animals and siblings, and they're just as safe as hospital births. The statistics tell us that the mortality rates and the morbidity rates are actually the same. But the bonding rates are so different. The bonding qualities are so different in home births.
Right. So you have brought to the surface a couple of things, the cultural aspects that you mentioned, and then the epigenetic consequences that you speak about. I remember Michel Ladon speaking about these consequences in initially helping, I don't remember which breed of dogs who had a difficult time to give birth to their pups. And they discovered that after a while, this specific breed of dogs could not give birth to their pups unless it was a cesarean, and that rang a bell. Now we see what you said, that Caesarean-born women run the higher possibilities of giving birth to their children cesarean again, repeating the cycle, repeating the experience.
Yeah, I mean, all kinds of statistics now that cesarean-born children tend to have more psychological problems. They tend to have a higher array of ADHD, for example. They tend to have a harder time concentrating because you never know, when someone's going to come and get you. And they tend to be simultaneously. This is so interesting and so tricky to reconcile. Simultaneously dependent on help from the outside and simultaneously resenting. having to have help from outside. Isn't that just messes with your mind when you put yourself in their shoes? And that's what's so important about what we're doing these days is we're saying to everybody, these babies, prenatally, perinatally, and right after they're born, they have a mind and they have feelings, and their mind is very programmable at this age. So every little thing we do matters. You know, it's just so many vast numbers of neural connections are made right around birth that you can imagine the difference between being born in water or these, those wonderful ocean births. Talk about flow, you know, compared to a hospital with bells going off and intercoms, chattering and lots of strangers around and the clanking of tools and it's just, we need to have empathy for what these babies have been through. So the big push in general is what was it like for the baby? And because of what happened, you know, can we see how the baby not only experiences life, but how they form belief systems? This
Mm,
is what life is like. They form behavior patterns. Don't touch me. I don't know if I'm going to be safe. They form all kinds of more isolating, um, just internal expectations. It's so sad, you know. Thank God we can do cesarean births when they're medically needed. But nowadays, we're hearing that you know that they're more profitable for hospitals.
mm,
Doctors don't want to wait around and listen to a woman screaming. Well, when they could, take control over the birth and have a live birth with the baby breathing and a heartbeat. Okay, great. We got a successful birth, you know, and go on to the next one. And that's just the wrong way to think about ourselves as human beings. We need our bodies. We need to trust our bodies. We need to know that there's peace and wisdom in what our bodies can do, and that mankind intervening with these natural processes, unless it's medically necessary, only diminishes and marginalizes the natural processes that are so, to me, so sacred.
You touch a lot of interesting themes, Carlton. As I see it, when you deal with a C-section born person, child, you don't have one, let's say, client, quotation marks. It is also the mother who of parent who needs to be supported so that the parent can also, especially if the parent was born a C-section, has his or her own um, pain to balance or his own issues or her own issues to balance. It is the society, the culture that also needs to be uh, supported this, so that it can see
Mm.
whatever decisions made, what the consequences, including the culture of the obstetrics and the maternity spaces um, policies. So it's not one thing. It's a multi-level uh, aspect that we are asked to explore and to do something.
So true, Olga. We're talking about something that is constellating throughout culture now. And it's not being constellated by whatever forces created nature or the cosmos.
Mm,
It's our will imposed upon ourselves and running the show ourselves. It's happening without enough awareness of what the consequences are. We're playing with dynamite.
Right.
Carl Sagan used to say, and he wasn't talking about births, but he was talking about industry and how simple industry suddenly has no idea what the long-term consequences are of what they're doing. And the birth industry has that very issue too. And it's a pity, we long for the day when obstetricians and other birth practitioners know what the psychological consequences of interventions are and understand what they might be doing by using a ventouse or putting Pitocin into the veins of a mother. They understand what that might do to the baby and what that might do to the future of that baby and the baby going to school with other babies who've had the same things happening and it's kind of mushrooming out of control. And if they just knew, if they just had to take a weekend workshop, not even a semester, but to get your license, sorry guys, you have to have a weekend workshop on the psychological consequences of all your interventions that you might do. Gosh, they might just take a breath before they make a choice that's going to influence someone for a lifetime.
Mm. Then,
And so,
yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Please keep your uh, thread of thought. Uh, do young parents, especially young mothers who are pregnant, realize this, are willing to explore possibilities? Uh, because we have a big group of selective cesarean. And this group of ladies or parents who select to give birth to their child cesarean, uh, do they know about it, about the consequences? Are they aware? Is there something that is that overburdens them and that steals some energy from doing that? What have you seen?
no, no, no. We in the pre and perinatal sciences have done a lousy, wimpy job of explaining to the whole public what's going on. And we need to do that. And in fact, that's just what I was going to answer your same question. There were two parts. One, we need to educate birth practitioners. Two, we need to educate girls, young women of childbearing age, about what possibilities are waiting for them when they get pregnant and what they can do. And this is where I'm, at KTBT and with many of our colleagues, we are really emphasizing the intention to get through to young women. And that means we need to be on these media platforms. We need to be on Instagram. We need to be on TikTok, where curious young women are getting their taking advice about how to do things. And when a young woman realizes that she can give birth, it might be scary or challenging, but the body is made to do that. And you can get help and support from someone to be there with you who knows what they're doing, and you can do it without going into a hospital. And if you do it that way, these statistics will be different. And here they are, boom, boom, boom. Say it all in, 3-minute TikTok tidbit and say it over and over again. Have young women telling about their experiences to other young women. And young women don't want to look at someone like me and take advice about the intimate operations of their body and tell them how to live their lives. We need the demand to change. So we need to educate birth practitioners and we need to educate the birth consumers who are young women, beautiful, innocent girls, who become a mother. Once you're a mother, you're kind of not a girl anymore. You're a mother. You've changed forever. And motherhood can be different than yours was, young lady. Motherhood, if you give birth and you think about these things, can be better for you and your child and your family. We have better bonding, we have better relationships, we have go this way, you have better grades in school, you have people growing up with different kinds of intelligence levels, because they haven't had so much shocking things happen to them, and so many things that interfere with the absorption of education. So let's get through to obstetricians and young women of childbearing age. And that's the only chance we have. I don't know how else to make things change. Organizations are not going to do it. They have a business, it's thriving. There are tool businesses, there are insurance businesses, there are pharmaceutical businesses, there are hospital businesses, there are medical businesses, and they think things are just fine. We need to figure out how to make more money actually now. Let's work on that. And when we do that, we crush the very thing that's most precious to us because love and babies are the most precious thing we have. And anybody, even the captains of industry, will melt when they're holding a grandchild.
Mm.
So why do we do things that can really act like a virus and keep working inside people and pass it on from generation to generation, from obstetrician and surgeon as a mentor to their students, just passing on these really terrific these possibilities that have terrific potential for degrading a human being's experience of life.
Mm. So, Carlton, once again, you confirm that uh, it is a lifelong process of putting things more harmonious or better, and it can be at birth, in gestation, after birth, when you are an adolescent, or just before becoming a parent yourself. Any time is a good time to start changing your attitude and your relation with the self, the world, and the child you will welcome later on in your environment.
Yeah, that's so true. We don't have parents who can talk to very young babies about these things.
Mm.
We don't have parents who would, to a 3-year-old, say, "Man, you were such a hero during your birth. You worked really hard to get here, honey. I'm so glad you made it. Wherever you came from. I'm so glad you're here and that you came to me. It was hard. We know it was hard, but you did it." We don't have education in elementary schools at even storytelling levels. There are lots of metaphoric ways to talk about pregnancy and birth, and girls will understand it. Maybe not the boys, but the girls will get it.
Mhm.
And you might be talking about teddy bears or little baby rabbits, but you know how that can sink in. And then, junior high and high school, sex education is ridiculous in our country. And nobody talks about it. It's taboo, especially nowadays with people who are so uptight about the body and natural things. And, why aren't we telling women and the boys, I don't want to exclude boys and men from this at all, But the power is in the hands of the women. Ultimately, they're the ones who are going to talk to their partner and decide how they're going to give birth and know why they're going to give birth because they're researching it. And the problem is they're researching it on TikTok and Instagram. So we got to get there with the facts, with the information we have that we can share from our clinical practices and so forth. So it's education of conveying really precious information to the young feminine energies, the femininity, the feminine archetypes in our culture, especially young women.
Mm. So, Carlton, if a mother, let's say, or a father realizes, oh my God, this is important to look at. My child is some months old or some years old. How can I do something? And wants to get to know, understand, and act accordingly. What is the first thing, the first step, better say, that this interested, good intentions parent, how does he start or how does she start?
It needs to start in storybooks that are being read to preschool children.
Have you got a title to suggest or no?
How about we write a book about teddy bears who get pregnant and they do so by singing together and thinking a mama bear and a daddy bear want to have a baby and they wonder, should we have a baby? What would that baby look like? And they snuggle up during their hibernation and then there's a little baby bear that comes along, and the baby bear is in this place with them, and they're talking to the baby bear, even though they can't see the baby bear. They know the baby bear is there, and they know they love the baby bear. So they're saying, "Baby bear, we're gonna love you. We can't wait to meet you. We know you're there. We know you can hear us. I wonder how you're feeling. Can you tell us how you're feeling?" This prenatal bonding is just terrific when it's done, like prenatal bonding VA and like the way that Rafai taught it. Those babies not only have easier births, but they're really good at bonding because they've been bonded with their whole lives from the beginning. So you can teach 3, 4, 5-year-olds about this with, this sort of a book. You could also, we could create dolls that are have a pregnant doll that like a pregnant Barbie, would be really cute, and you could have a pregnant, breastfeeding Barbie. Wouldn't that be great? We don't have these things in our culture because I think because men run so much of it, and it's more about money than it is about harmony and relationship and I think that's taking us pretty down a pretty dark pathway in some ways, and I think if we get obstetricians educated and we get mothers to be understanding the agency they have, the power they have, we're going to this
Mm.
obstetrician because we heard that she supports home births and she also trains midwives and she has babies. She's given birth. That demand needs to arise from education that we uh, plant seeds in the minds and the souls of these young women all the way through, and especially in high school and college. God, just be really frank about it. Here's some statistics, in college and high school. There's some
Mm.
statistics, recovery time, about bonding, about ADHD, about satisfaction after giving birth, about how whole family feels about it. Those need to be organized and categorized and handed out in high school and college.
Right. So they start with when the child is young, with storytelling, either books or perhaps the wider storytelling aspect. And then what is next?
You know, one thing I just thought of, I have a 2-year-old granddaughter. You've seen pictures of her. And she now is looking at TV
Mm.
once in a while. And when, for 30 minutes or 20 minutes. And the TV shows that are the most popular are ones where there's a woman being vulnerable and sweet, but they don't take things very far the way they could. These TV shows could be, instead of silly, I mean, a lot of them are about being friendly and being nice and honoring other people's needs, but what about a TV show for little young children where babies are involved and they're maybe making some of the decisions for the family and they're respected, and that could be really captivating for a 2-year-old mind. I think about, when she's watching some of the shows that she watches, and, she's not allowed to watch a lot, but when once in a while she has a favorite show, and I can tell what's captivating her. And what captivates her are the things that are sweet, things that go in deep, things that feel good, the things that make her smile, you know? So we need TV production to think about that. Imagine if we could orient movies, some really interesting movies coming out from Pixar about girls' vulnerabilities and their feelings and their emotions and getting their periods. And there's some great movies coming out. Why not think about an even younger generation to appeal to with movies that have more metaphor and more symbolic, but talk about the same thing? I think you could have a real business, and we need to appeal to the business minds to get something produced and get it out there. Mm.
Actually, out of the box, transdisciplinary, transcultural, all all people, all groups, or all disciplines or professions can contribute something very special, very precious towards this direction of reconnecting and re-establishing good relations.
Yeah, I'm visualizing that possibility every day. That's why I do what I do.
Yeah. So, when do you think this book is gonna be out?
Oh man. It's one of those processes where we start writing and then we realize how much more there is to it that we should share. I'm not sure when our goal is to have a rough draft by the end of the year and then maybe bring an editor in to look at it.
Right, so 2026 or latest 2027,
Yeah. Hmm.
right? Okay, excellent.
No, I raise your Caesarean-born baby.
I raise a Caesarean-born baby.
Mhm.
Hmm. Good. So let's leave this talk with your message to all those who will benefit from getting even a glimpse of this book.
Mhm.
What is your message?
Your baby is a person with a mind. And they came from somewhere. Maybe they came from the same place we came from. And maybe there's still a little bit of that place surrounding them when they're new. You feel it in a baby. You can feel divinity and innocence and the power of divinity and innocence. And whatever that baby goes through needs to be, we need to be curious about it. What happened to you, honey? Tell us about it. Help us understand you. If you've got enough to eat and you're not cold, you've been burped, tell us. You can cry. We can hear you. We want to know, are you mad or sad or scared? We care about listening to you. The more you inform us, baby, who's fresh from the other world, the more we'll bring that divine, unconditional loving aspects of that other world into our family and into our culture. So we want to meet our babies and know about them and learn where they came from. And to do that, we have to be truthful to ourselves about what they went through to get here and how hard that was. No human being has it easy.
Thank you.